3 o'clock in the morning, local time, in the Iranian port city of Bandar Abbas, a city built on the edge of the Strait of Hormuz, a building collapsed. Not from an earthquake, not from structural failure, from an Israeli precision airstrike. Inside that building was a meeting of the senior leadership of the IRGC Navy, the men responsible for Iran's most powerful strategic weapon in this war, the near-total blockade of the Strait of Hormuz that has sent oil prices up 45% in 26 days and stranded over 2,000 ships. The commander of that navy, Admiral Alireza Tangsiri, was killed in the strike, along with Behnam Rezaei, the head of IRGC Navy Intelligence, along with multiple senior naval officers. Iran's entire naval command structure, in one building, eliminated in one strike. What happened this morning in Bandar Abbas is not just a military strike. It is the most consequential single operation in the Strait of Hormuz in this entire war. And I want to explain exactly why. Because what most coverage will miss today is the specific nature of what was just lost, what it means for the blockade, and what it means for your gas prices in the next 30 days. My name is General Marcus Webb. I spent 34 years inside United States Army intelligence, including 9 years at the Defense Intelligence Agency, where I reviewed assessments on IRGC naval command structure, Hormuz closure doctrine, and Iranian maritime warfare capabilities across 3 administrations. This morning's strike was not a lucky hit. It was the product of one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations in modern military history. Let me show you exactly what was achieved, and why Iran's most dangerous card just got dramatically harder to play. Alireza Tangsiri had commanded the IRGC Navy since August 2018, 8 years in command of the force responsible for Iran's most critical strategic asset, control of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. He was not a figurehead, he was an operator. In November 2021, while U.S. and Iranian negotiators were holding nuclear talks in Vienna, Tangsiri stood in front of Iranian state television cameras and told the world that the United States had come to understand the Islamic Republic's supremacy at sea. That was not bluster for domestic consumption. That was a doctrine statement. He believed it, and he spent 8 years building the capability to back it up. Under his command, the IRGC Navy expanded its inventory to thousands of weapons, missiles, drones, naval mines, fast attack craft. He oversaw the development of maritime drones specifically designed for swarming attacks on commercial shipping. He directed the intelligence gathering operations that gave Iran its picture of every vessel transiting the Gulf. He was a personal appointee of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, which means he had a direct relationship to the top of the Iranian command structure that most IRGC commanders do not have. When the war started on February 28th, Tangsiri moved to Bandar Abbas personally. He was not running the Hormuz operation from Tehran. He was running it from the port city that sits directly at the mouth of the strait. He was physically present, personally directing, personally approving every maritime operation. His social media accounts were posting updates on which ships were permitted to pass and which were blocked. He was the public face, the operational brain, and the institutional memory of the Hormuz blockade strategy, all in one person. What makes this morning's strike even more significant is how long Tangsiri survived. Israel has been systematically eliminating Iranian military and government leadership since the beginning of this war. Supreme Leader Khamenei was killed on day 1. Security Chief Ali Larijani followed. Dozens of senior officials have been eliminated in targeted strikes across the country. Tangsiri survived 2 full waves of assassinations. He survived because he was careful. He moved frequently. He avoided predictable patterns. He used civilian buildings. The building that collapsed this morning in Bandar Abbas was residential, specifically to complicate Israeli targeting decisions. The fact that Israel found him anyway, in a city he had chosen for its operational significance rather than its safety, in a meeting with his entire senior staff, tells you something important about the intelligence capability that made this strike possible. I will come back to that. To understand what was lost this morning, you need to understand what Tangsiri built and what it has cost the world. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Through those 21 miles, approximately 20 million barrels of crude oil transit every single day. 1/5 of all the oil traded globally on any given day passes through that strait. Tangsiri's strategy was not to close the strait with military force. That would have triggered an immediate, overwhelming U.S. response. His strategy was to make the strait effectively uncrossable through a combination of threats, mine-laying operations, harassment of commercial shipping, and targeted strikes, while stopping just short of the trigger point that would justify a full American military response to reopen it. It was a calibrated stranglehold, not a fist, a hand slowly tightening. The result? Oil prices rose from approximately $75 per barrel before the war to over $110 today. That is a 45% increase in 26 days. The International Energy Agency's director has called this worse than the two energy crises of the 1970s combined. 2,000 vessels are currently stranded. 20,000 seafarers are trapped. European gas prices spiked 35% in a single day when Iran struck the Qatari LNG complex. That price shock is arriving at American gas stations right now. Tangsiri built that. He ran it. He was the architect, the operator, and the decision-maker, all in the same person. Tangsiri's blockade operated through three simultaneous instruments. The first was naval mines. The IRGC Navy has an inventory of several thousand mines, including contact mines, influence mines that respond to magnetic signatures or acoustic signatures, and rocket-propelled mines capable of being deployed rapidly across a wide area. Tangsiri personally directed the mine-laying operations that have made commercial insurers unwilling to underwrite Gulf transit, effectively closing the strait economically even before it was closed militarily. The second was swarm drone operations. Under Tangsiri's development program, the IRGC Navy fielded maritime drones capable of coordinated attacks on individual vessels. These are not the improvised weapons they were 5 years ago. They are purpose-built, GPS-guided, capable of targeting specific vessel types, and deployable in numbers that overwhelm individual ship defenses. Tangsiri oversaw their development from prototype to operational deployment. The third was intelligence dominance. Behnam Rezaei, the IRGC Navy Intelligence Director killed in the same strike this morning, ran the network that gave Tangsiri his picture of every vessel in the Gulf. Who owned it, what it was carrying, where it was going, which ships had connections to American or Israeli interests. The intelligence operation was what allowed the blockade to be selective, letting some vessels pass, blocking others, maintaining the pressure without triggering the full military response. All three instruments died in Bandar Abbas this morning. Finding Alireza Tangsiri was not a simple targeting problem. He had survived 2 waves of Israeli assassination operations by being unpredictable, mobile, and paranoid. He used civilian cover. He moved without predictable patterns. He communicated through channels designed to evade Israeli signals intelligence. But he made one operational choice that ultimately made him findable. He chose to be physically present in Bandar Abbas, personally directing the Hormuz operation, because he believed the operational situation required his direct involvement. He was right about that operationally. The Hormuz blockade needed his expertise and his authority to function. But being present and being operational meant generating a signature, a pattern of activity, a location history, a network of communications with the naval officers around him, that Israel's intelligence apparatus could track. The meeting that was struck this morning, the meeting that killed Tangsiri, Rezaei, and the senior naval staff, was a command meeting, a real-time operational coordination session, the kind of meeting that a commander runs when things are moving fast and decisions need to be made in person. Intelligence collection against IRGC command networks had been building a picture of Tangsiri's operational patterns for weeks. The meeting in Bandar Abbas was not a coincidence. It was a target that had been developed over time, with multiple sources confirming the location, the attendees, and the timing. The strike itself was a demonstration of the precision that has defined Israeli targeting throughout this war. A residential building in a port city, surrounded by civilians. At 3 o'clock in the morning, a time chosen specifically to minimize civilian casualties while ensuring the target was present. The building collapsed. The senior naval leadership inside was eliminated. The adjacent structures show minimal damage in the available footage. That precision is not accidental. It is the product of years of investment in intelligence weapons integration, the ability to take a target developed by intelligence, translated into precise aim points, and deliver a munition with enough accuracy to destroy a specific building without leveling a city block. Israel has demonstrated this capability repeatedly throughout this war, from the strikes that killed Khamenei on day one, to the elimination of dozens of senior commanders in subsequent weeks, to this morning's strike in Bandar Abbas. Each successful strike is also a message. To every IRGC commander who is still alive, you are not safe. The intelligence network that found Tangsiri is still running, and it is looking for you. The first and most immediate consequence is operational. The Hormuz blockade did not run itself. It required continuous decision-making, which ships to target, when to lay mines, when to hold back, how to calibrate the pressure without triggering overwhelming American retaliation. Those decisions required someone with the operational experience, the institutional knowledge, and the command authority to make them in real time. That person was Tangsiri. And he is gone, along with the intelligence director who gave him his picture of the battle space. Whoever replaces him, and the IRGC will appoint a replacement, will inherit the physical assets of the blockade. The mines are still in the water. The drones are still operational. The fast attack craft are still there, but they will not inherit 8 years of institutional knowledge about how to use those assets at the operational level. They will not inherit Tangsiri's direct relationship with the supreme leader that gave him the authority to make real-time decisions without seeking approval from Tehran. And they will not inherit Rezaei's intelligence network, which died with its director this morning. The blockade will continue in some form, but it will be less precise, less calibrated, and less effective than the blockade Tangsiri was running. And a less calibrated blockade is a more dangerous one, because the risk of miscalculation, of an action that triggers the full American military response that Tangsiri was carefully avoiding, goes up significantly. The second consequence is diplomatic, and this one is happening right now, in real time, as I record this. Iran and the United States are in the middle of, depending on who you ask, either active indirect negotiations through Pakistani intermediaries, or no negotiations at all. Both governments are making contradictory public statements about what is happening. What I can tell you from 34 years of watching how governments behave in these situations is this. The loss of the IRGC Navy's entire senior leadership changes the internal Iranian calculation about how long they can sustain the current strategy. The Hormuz blockade was Iran's primary leverage in any negotiation. It was the card that allowed Iran to demand reparations, demand sovereignty recognition, demand guarantees, because as long as the strait was effectively closed, Iran's leverage was real and immediate. Tangsiri was the man who held that card. His death does not end the blockade, but it weakens the confidence with which Iran can continue to play it. Any Iranian negotiator sitting across from a Pakistani intermediary today has to factor in that the operational command of their most important strategic weapon was just eliminated. That changes the internal calculation about how long the current position can be sustained, and that shifts the deal timeline. Watch the next 48 hours. If Iran moves toward a more concrete negotiating position, not the 5 maximalist conditions announced yesterday, but something more transactional, this morning's strike will be one of the primary reasons. The third consequence is the one that matters most to everyone watching this. Oil is currently trading at over $110 per barrel. Gas prices across the United States have risen between 40 and 60 cents per gallon since the war began, depending on your region. That increase is directly attributable to the Hormuz disruption that Tangsiri was running. The death of the blockade's architect does not immediately reopen the strait. The mines are still there. The threat is still real. The 2,000 stranded vessels are not going anywhere today, but the market is already responding to the strategic implications. Oil futures were trading lower in early Asian session following news of the strike, a reflection of the market's assessment that the probability of a sustained, intelligently managed blockade has decreased. Here is what the next 30 days look like based on this morning's development. If Iran's new naval command attempts to maintain the blockade at current intensity without Tangsiri's calibration, the probability of a miscalculation, a strike or mine deployment that crosses the American red line and triggers a full reopening operation increases significantly. A miscalculation accelerates the end of the blockade. Lower oil prices follow. If Iran reads the loss of Tangsiri as a signal to move toward a deal, which the parallel diplomatic track suggests is possible, the blockade winds down as part of a negotiated settlement. Also, lower oil prices. The scenario where oil prices stay above $100 for the next 90 days requires Iran to sustain a precisely calibrated blockade without the man who built it. That is a significantly harder operational problem than it was yesterday. The direction is down. The timeline is uncertain. But this morning's strike moved the needle toward relief at the pump, and that matters to every American watching this. Tangsiri's death is not an isolated event. It is the latest, and arguably the most consequential, in a systematic program of leadership elimination that has been running since the first day of this war. On February 28th, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed within hours of the first strikes. Since then, Israel has eliminated the security chief, multiple IRGC commanders, missile program directors, and now the entire senior naval command. This is not opportunistic targeting. It is a doctrine. The doctrine is based on an insight that military strategists have debated for decades, that modern military organizations are more dependent on specific human expertise than their official structures suggest. The IRGC Navy is not just an organization. It was, in a significant sense, Alireza Tangsiri. His 8 years of experience, his specific knowledge of the Hormuz operational environment, his personal relationships with the officers who ran each component of the blockade, none of that transfers to his successor through an organizational chart. What Israel has been doing, systematically and with remarkable precision, is not just removing commanders. It is removing the institutional knowledge that makes Iran's most dangerous capabilities operational. That is a different kind of warfare, and it is working. Every military power on earth is watching this program. Russia's military leadership, watching from Moscow, is drawing its own conclusions about what precision, intelligence-led targeting at this scale means for the survivability of its own command structure in any future conflict with NATO. China's People's Liberation Army is running the same analysis with Taiwan in mind. The lesson they are drawing is not that their leaders are safe because they have better security. The lesson is that the intelligence-to-targeting pipeline that found Tangsiri in a residential building in Bandar Abbas at 3 a.m. can find anyone, anywhere, if it is given enough time and enough collection against the right networks. Alireza Tangsiri survived 2 waves of assassinations. He was careful, mobile, and paranoid. He hid in civilian buildings. He was one of the best protected military commanders in Iran. He was killed in a precision strike at 3 o'clock in the morning. That capability, that combination of intelligence, precision, and operational patience, is what adversaries of the United States and Israel are reassessing today. At 3 o'clock this morning, a building in Bandar Abbas collapsed. The man who built Iran's Hormuz blockade, the weapon that has cost you 40 cents more per gallon of gas, that has stranded 20,000 sailors, that has pushed the global economy toward crisis, died in that building. Along with his intelligence chief, along with his senior staff, along with 8 years of institutional knowledge about how to keep that weapon running. The blockade is not over. The mines are still in the water. The threat is still real, but the architect is gone. And organizations built around one person's expertise do not recover from that quickly. Watch oil futures tonight. Watch what Iran says in the next 48 hours. Watch whether the deal timeline compresses. What happened this morning in Bandar Abbas matters. I wanted to make sure you understood exactly why. My name is General Marcus Webb. If this briefing gave you something the news wasn't giving you, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next briefing covers the intelligence method that found Tangsiri in a building no one was supposed to know about. The system that has eliminated every senior Iranian commander in this war, and what it tells us about American intelligence capabilities that most people will never fully appreciate. I will see you there.